Greetings and welcome to a special edition of Montpelier Connection. This is a summer edition, and we're here to highlight 3 of the 4 primary candidates in the Democratic primary for state senate here in Windham County. My name is Mike Mrowicki. I'm the state representative from the Windham 4 district of Putney, Dummerston, Westminster. And today we have Roger Albee, Becca Balint, and Senator Jeanette White. Thanks for coming.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
The way we're going to do this today, each will have 3 minutes to give an opening statement, then we'll have some questions, and then a closing statement. And hopefully this will give you at home a great opportunity to get a better sense of the people who you can vote for. And actually you can start voting now, because early voting has started. Thanks. Roger, can we start with you?
Well, thank you very much, and thanks, Mike, for doing this. Yes, my name is Roger Albee. I'm running for the Senate as well. I was born in Brattleboro, Vermont, and grew up in Brookline on a hillside farm just up the river, so to speak, and have been very involved in many things. I've served my country. I've certainly served my state. I've served my community, and now I want to serve Windham County. I've served my country as a Vietnam-era veteran in the U.S. Army. I've served my state as Secretary of Ag, Food and Markets, and I think with some distinguished service, being a finalist for the Vermonter of the Year by the Burlington Free Press, as well as Agricultural Hall of Fame. I've served my community in bringing business and helping to grow business and bringing senior housing to the West River Valley, as well as businesses to the Brattleboro community. I believe that I know what Windham County needs. I've traveled almost every back road in the county and been on almost in every community in some way. And I think it's a pleasure for all of us to be here to indicate what we can do going forward to represent our county aggressively in Montpelier.
Thanks. Becca?
I'm Becca Balint. I live here, excuse me, I live here in Brattleboro on South Main Street. And I'm a teacher, I'm a working mom, and I'm someone who cares very deeply about the economic landscape here in Windham County. I wanted to tell a little story that happened to me some months ago. I was driving home with my children, driving home from school. My son called from the back of the van and he said, "Mom, let's take a different way home." And I'm someone who tends to be prone to ruts. I sometimes will eat the same multigrain toast every morning for for a year because it's easy. But on this particular day, I thought, well, my kids would like to see a different part of Brattleboro. And so I'm going to do that. And we drove up Oregon Street past the SD Oregon factory. And my son was completely enthralled by the slate-covered buildings below. And he said, "What is that, Mom? What is that down there in all those buildings?" And I said, "That's the SD Oregon factory." And Brattleboro used to be known all over the world for beautiful pipe and reed organs. And my son said, "Well, what do we make here now? What are we known for now?" And I said, "Well, we are an arts community. We have amazing music and photography and drama. We even have a circus school." And my son said, yeah, I know, Mom. I know all that. I want to know, what do we make here that we can use? And I thought about this a lot because I care very deeply about having an economy that makes things that are useful to people, because it feels good to be a producer of things that other people use. So in thinking about that, I've thought about how difficult it is in Windham County for working families to make a go of it. And I've heard so often in the last few years, you know, I love it here, but I see no future here for my children. And that worries me deeply, because I love this town, I love this county, I want to do whatever I can to make it a place where people can thrive and where children feel like they have a future. Now, there are lots of things that we can do at the state level to try to help working families here in Windham County. A couple of the ones that I've been thinking of lately is that we need to put concerted effort into workforce development here in Windham County so that we have a strong workforce that attracts jobs and keeps jobs. We also need to work really carefully to fix the school funding mechanism to reduce property taxes, because the burden on property tax payers is rising to an extent that it's becoming untenable. And the last thing is we really need to fund our judiciary to the extent that it was intended to be funded. We have a real rampant drug problem here in Windham County, and that affects not just the quality of life here, but also our potential for economic development here in Windham County. I love what I do as an educator. I love what I do as a columnist in the Brattleboro Reformer. I've heard from a lot of people all over the county who are ready for a change in the conversation that we're having about economic development. And I would be proud to represent our county in Montpelier. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Jeanette?
Thanks, Mike, and thanks to BCTV for putting this on. Once again, bringing information to the voters in Windham County. I've been in the Senate now for 12 years, and yes, I am asking to go back again, even knowing what it is. When I first went up there, I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I know now. It is humbling to be up there, to be in the seats that people have been sitting in for the last 250 years and feel those ghosts rolling around in the building. It's frustrating because everything takes a long time and there are many different sides to every issue. It's an honor to be up there and serving Windham County and the state of Vermont. It is all consuming. I often am at the State House by 7:30 in the morning and often don't leave until 8 or 8:30 at night. And it's a challenge because you're dealing with 180 people who all believe in the best for Vermont and want the best for Vermont, but have very, very differing views. So knowing all that, I'm still asking for your support to send me back again. In the Senate, we serve on 2 committees, and over the years I've been on Health and Welfare, and I serve on the Judiciary Committee, and I have, for the last 8 years, chaired Government Operations. Health and Welfare, it's pretty clear what that does. Judiciary, it's pretty clear what that does. Government Operations, it's a little bit less clear what that does. But in my opinion, that is the foundation of our whole democracy. It deals with elections, it deals with municipal issues, it deals with the structure of government itself. And I love that. And think that no matter what we do in any of the other areas, if we don't have a strong foundation to our democracy, that the other solutions aren't going to last. So over those 12 years, I have built up some strengths, I think. One of them is to be able to take all sides of an issue, listen respectfully to people who are on completely opposite sides of that issue, and bring them together and address all the issues and come up with solutions that are the best for the state of Vermont and for Windham County. I've also developed a lot of relationships up there, and relationships are what gets things done. So I would like to continue to use those strengths to serve Windham County and Vermont as we look at healthcare reform, which is a big issue this year, and I'm absolutely devoted to single-payer healthcare, and I will work hard for it. We need to create an environment in our community and a culture where all people can prosper. We can't have the division between the haves and the have-nots has grown too big. There are other issues, education issues, law enforcement, government transparency and accountability. Those are just a few. There's tons of issues that we must deal with. So it's an honor to serve Windham County, and I would ask for your vote to send me back. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jeanette. What we're going to do here in the hour we're going to spend with the candidates and with the viewers at home, we've got 3 questions we're going to ask each one to comment on, and then we'll have some time at the end for a follow-up closing statement of each candidate. Becca, I think we'll start with you next. Around the world, in this country, and in Vermont, climate change is one of the biggest issues we're facing, that our kids will be chasing. You can cut that out, Roland. Not that our kids will be chasing, our kids will be facing generations to come.
Or chasing.
They might be chasing.
On the national scale, recognition of climate change is coming from real estate people in Florida who are seeing they're losing land. Insurance companies are starting to take note that their claims are way up, and it's continuing like that. The effects are real. Right here in Vermont, what we know now is our driving habits, our cars, and home heating, leaky homes, are the 2 biggest contributors to our carbon footprint. how would you address those concerns? Big picture and little picture?
Yeah, well, that's great because I was thinking about this a lot in terms of big picture and little picture. About a year ago, my reel mower died, the push kind, and it was very difficult to find a place here in Windham County where I could get it sharpened. So I was going to buy a new mower, and I was committed to buying an electric mower. And I thought that it would be pretty easy to find one, and it wasn't. And one of the things I've been thinking about is a very concrete thing we can do as consumers in Vermont who care about climate change is to be much more vocal with our suppliers in the area about the kind of products that we want to buy, whether it is a lawnmower that is electric powered or whether it's a car that's more energy efficient. Now, we are a small state, and in the big scheme of things, our carbon footprint is fairly small, but we have a lot of people within the state who are very dedicated to reducing our carbon footprint, and I'm one of them. Weatherization, of course, is a huge issue. It's an issue in my own house. I had an energy audit done and realized that in some ways I was stuck because the kind of insulation in my walls, the formaldehyde, did not allow for additional insulation in there. So we have a lot of complicated issues with the older housing stock, specifically here in Brattleboro and in Bellows Falls and the other surrounding towns in Windham County. So it isn't as easy as saying, you know, we have to deal more with weatherization. We have to know that it's more complicated than just better insulation of homes. But on the transportation front, I feel like there are lots of things that we can be trying. I heard a report the other day out of, I believe it was out of Sacramento, about bike trains. And I was thinking about how in Vermont, we still have so many kids traveling to school on the bus. And here in Brattleboro, we used to have neighborhood schools, but because of other reasons, the neighborhood schools were decentralized because of economic reasons. And so an unintended consequence was that kids needed to travel farther to get to schools. I would like to see the Department of Education encourage schools in Vermont to develop walking trains, bike trains in all the municipalities so that we can reduce the amount of time our kids are on school buses and the amount of fossil fuels that we are using. Certainly, we need to look at a variety of renewables. We have a very ambitious goal in Vermont to be using 90% of renewable energy by the year 2050, I believe it is. And in order to do that, we're going to need a wide variety of energy resources. But the most important thing that we can do as consumers is use less on the personal level and on the town level and the school level. So.
Jeanette?
This is a complicated issue, and what it's going to take is going to take money. On the home front, we have our goal for that is 80,000 homes in Vermont weatherized by 2020. Since 2008, we have managed to weatherize 6,700. That means we're going to have to do, 8,000 a year for the next few years. It's a matter of finding a dedicated funding source for it and being true to using that source for that purpose. I don't know that we'll meet our goal. It's a very ambitious goal. I do think that one of the things that we can do is we can create an all fuels efficiency program. We have Efficiency Vermont, which deals with electricity, but we don't have any programs around all fuels efficiency. And around the world, our Efficiency Vermont program is renowned, and people wonder how we did it and try to emulate it. So I think we can do the same thing with all fuels efficiency. We also, on the transportation front, I think there's a lot that we can do. We can encourage more park and rides. We're just about to get a new one in Putney, which is very exciting. We can encourage compact land use. And focusing on our downtowns. That, of course, doesn't solve all the issues, but it would help, I think, if we did that. We can encourage the use of hybrids and electric vehicles, but many of us can't afford them, so we have to make provisions for people who can't afford them. On the general energy front, I think that there's a lot more we could do to we could have much more of a presence in the ISO New England, which is the transmission people, and in FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, I believe is what it is. We have been, I think, lax in making our presence known there and in pushing our needs forward. And I believe that we can do a lot with community methane programs. We're going to be having some pilot project at the Windham Solid Waste Management District they're doing methane now, but we're going to have a solar project in there. And we can also make more money available for research and development for small entrepreneurs who are, there's some pretty exciting people out there who have great ideas, and we could make R&D money available to them. And also for farmers for their anaerobic digesters, not only for the digester themselves, but how do we help them deal with the byproducts of it? How do we help them commercialize that so that they can get some return for it and other people can make use of the byproduct? And I'm not going to go into that, but it's a great program to do. So there are lots of things we can do. They're all going to take money, but I do believe that, as Becca said, that one of the things we can all do is be more efficient in our homes, in our towns, in the state, in our businesses. We just have an electric program for businesses now around efficiency, and they've been able to save a fair amount. So there's a lot we can do, and I hope we can get busy doing it.
Thanks. Roger?
Well, certainly climate change is affecting all aspects of our daily lives, our environment, our ways we work, our ways we transport, our agriculture in big ways, and it has to be addressed in a comprehensive way. We haven't had that comprehensive way to address it in Vermont yet. We talk about it. We certainly know we have pieces of it. We certainly know the big contributors to CO2. We know that transportation is the largest contributor to our CO2, about 59% of it. We know that home heating is a big contributor, about 33% or so. Electricity actually is a very small part of a contributor to CO2, I think about 4%. So we know what we have to tackle, and we know we have to tackle it aggressively in many ways. In terms of the home weatherization, I hate to use a cliche, but that's the biggest bang for the buck in terms of what we can accomplish. It always has been. It's not new. We've known it for years. We spent a lot of tax credits and things on energy production, but we haven't spent as much on weatherization. And frankly, we need to tackle that aggressively. In our downtowns as well. Many of our downtown buildings, which can be used for offices and for housing, if they were weatherized, they would be wonderful places for people who would want to go there. And yet, we really aren't tackling that aggressively. In terms of homes, there's alternative energy things that we should be working on in terms of heat pumps and new types of technology. You know, Jeanette talked about the ag side. I've been a leader in the ag side when I was secretary. We spent several $1 million in working on that. We worked on technology in terms of bringing German technology over because we didn't have it in Vermont in terms of creating ways to create methane on farms and looking at how it can be stalled on smaller farms. We did other sources of biofuels. We looked at growing switchgrass in terms of having special stoves that could burn it and not have noxic oxides go in the air because of these kind of stoves that could be used in homes for heating. And that type of technology needs to be advanced aggressively. We need to look at ways that we can deal with transportation because rural areas obviously do not get connected with bus transportation. You know, when we were in Montpelier, I remember people who worked in the agency with me said, well, I have to leave by 4:30 because I'm getting a bus to Burlington. and it came daily, and there was a certain time. We don't have that opportunity in rural areas, but there are other things that we certainly can do. We can be aggressive at encouraging ride sharing and provide incentives. And some businesses used to provide incentives for ride sharing for their employees. We can be aggressive in, I know UVM has a transportation center and they're doing some research in this area. We can look at, is there ways that we can have electric hookups for cars in rural areas where they can be connected at night or other times in terms of getting battery charges? And do we have ways of providing incentives so that people can actually get rid of their old cars that aren't efficient and have some ways of getting new cars or new vehicles that are more efficient? We spend a lot of activity talking about new generation. I remember when I was secretary, we were aggressive with the legislature on 25 by 25 initiative to have 25% of our electricity by the year 25 by other sources. And the legislature was solidly behind it. And at that time, the analysis was that 46% of our electricity, renewable electricity needs would have to come from agriculture and new crops. And we were aggressive in using the colleges, using research, using students, working with the UVM. We even had an algae project to look at how could we use algae from some of the manure that could grow algae and be used for creating oils that could be used in cars and other vehicles. So these are the kind of thing, it's the innovation, it's new things, but we really have to focus on where is the biggest bang for the buck. It's not from some other types of new generation perhaps, but generation is important, but we also have to focus on weatherization and ways to reduce the carbon footprint.
Thank you, Roger. In the last year of the most recent legislative session, the governor put forth an education governance proposal, which was controversial to say the least. It didn't go through, but our best guesses are we're going to see it again. For years, many of us have been concerned about increasing the outcomes, especially the performance gap from various economic demographics, and then the cost of education and how it impacts property taxes. Those two outcomes, I think, trying to lower or stabilize property taxes and better outcomes are what many of us are hoping for in any education plan. Jeanette, we'll start with you. How do you see us achieving those goals?
There's not anything that isn't a complicated issue up there, and I hate to always say this is a very complicated issue, but it is, and it's there's always this balance between local control and non-local control centralizing. So first of all, I think that we have to acknowledge that the financing and the governance that in education have to primarily be concerned with the quality. That's the bottom line. Are we getting a good education for our children with the current or any proposed governance, or with the current or any proposed financing? And I've lived in Vermont, Windham County, for 42 years. And in that 42 years, I've seen, I don't know what, maybe 10 different formulas for funding education, and they've all been wrong in somebody's mind. They've all been right in somebody's mind and all wrong in somebody's mind. So we have to tie the governance and the financing and the quality together in a better way. I don't think we've been very successful at doing that. In this instance, in many instances, I support our governor. In this one, I did not. I think that the mandatory restructuring and consolidation of schools was a bad idea. There might be consolidation, but it needs to come from the ground level. It needs to come from the local communities as to how best to consolidate. And by Montpelier trying to determine that this is the best way to do it, it wasn't going to happen. So I think we need to have a statewide conversation about how to identify the regional diverse solutions, because we do have regional diversity. Windham County is very different than Orleans County. And we need to acknowledge that. Chittenden County is very different than Windsor County. So until we can recognize that and can acknowledge that, we won't come up with systems or any system that supports the children and also has a common vision. So we need to start with that, and we need to start with the question of the quality of, are we getting what we're paying for, and are we getting what we need out of the governance structure? I don't have any magic answers, but there are many things that go into this. The poverty level of the children in the schools is a huge issue. So until we solve some of that, the schools aren't going to be able to function at their highest level. So we need to figure out how children are going to be fed when they come to school, and their parents are going to be able to make a living and not have to worry about sending their kids to school and then them coming home and not having anybody there. It's a very complicated issue, and I do hate to say that, but the more I get involved in any issue, the more complicated it becomes. I can tell you that at one point I thought I really had all the answers, but I don't. So.
Thank you. Roger?
Well, I think Jeanette's right. It is a complicated issue. I've been unelected on a school board in my life, and it's complicated not only for school boards, but it's complicated for the community as well in terms of education. I come from a family of educators. My wife's a teacher, and I like to say a very good teacher. She's now retired. I wouldn't be good if I didn't say that, but she is, and taught many years, in the last 9 in a Wardsboro, rural community. And, whatever community you go to, there's a great deal of poverty in Vermont. I remember talking to the dean of the Tuck Business School recently, and he said, we gave some money to a library in Vermont, he and his wife, and he said, we drove to the ceremony, and he said, I was amazed to see the amount of poverty in Vermont. And I said, well, it's unlike the city, you can see it in the cities. You can't see it in rural Vermont, but it's there. 1 in 5 people are food insufficient. There's many kids who rely on the schools to be their family. The teachers take food in, they take mittens in, they take gloves in, they provide that assistance that many of the kids don't have at home, that nurturing. But in terms of what's needed in the future, the other thing that sometimes, we all can remember that teacher who made a difference in our lives. We all can name those teachers that made a difference. And many times it is those teachers that make the difference in the lives. And many businesses actually look to locate their employees where they have good school systems. That's just the nature of economic development. There are actually firms who go around and do research on communities where they can locate employees because of the school system. So quality of education is extremely important. It varies by community. It varies by what happens. The local taxation has a big impact on every community in the state. As Jeanette knows, when it's pushed from the top down like Act 60 was, there's almost a revolution that occurs in the communities around the state. I went to a one-room school in Brookline for 8 years. There are not many of those left, and I'm not suggesting that they should be, but what I'm saying, those schools are a center of the community. They're a center of what people think their community is all about. The school picnics, the school plays, the teacher engagements, the family engagements, all that is a center of what we have in terms of local control and governance in Vermont. And the taxation issue has to be solved. Quality education is very important in terms of standards. My wife used to say, because I think she was an excellent teacher, she said, standards are important, but sometimes the creativity with a student isn't allowed anymore. An example of that, she had a student who was not very good in math. His father was a mechanic. So she said, bring in your father's mechanic books and we'll do a session around that. The student became very good in mathematics after that because it related to what the student wanted, what the student needed. And that kind of creativity does exist in many of our schools. Standards are important. In terms of taxation, yeah, it's a difficult issue. It has to be solved, but it can't be solved by Montpelier mandate a school consolidation unless the community is supportive and around it, and quality education needs to be part of that discussion.
Becca?
It's clear that local schools here in Vermont are the heart and soul of their communities. And not just because that's where students are educated and students are our future and our hope, but because communities literally wrap themselves around their schools and see their identity within their schools. And so for that reason, I do not support a top-down approach to any sort of governance change or consolidation plan for our schools. Now, I taught in 3 different small schools in Windham County, and there is a magic that happens in those small schools with the community being involved so closely in their child's education, whether it is making sure that students are connected to elders in the community, making sure that students know the history of their town and how it connects to Vermont. And something will absolutely be lost if we move away from that structure. That said, our goal and our challenge is to find that sweet spot between making sure that schools, local schools remain open and that the tax burden does not become crushing for local communities. Now, I had a very interesting extended email conversation with a voter after the Townsend Forum, and he and I have been emailing back and forth about this issue of governance. And one of the things he said is, I don't believe that we spend too much on education in Vermont, that you get what you pay for, and that if you want a quality, tight-knit community in a school, you have to pay for quality. And to a large extent, I absolutely agree with that. But we have to be proactive in these communities and towns, whether it's here in Brattleboro or up the road in some of the smaller schools in Windham, Townsend, Vernon, Guilford. And we have to encourage those difficult conversations to continue to happen. And what I mean by difficult conversations is having the community and the school sit down and say, what are our non-negotiables? What are the things in this school that must absolutely remain here so that we don't lose the heart and the soul of the school? And we need to balance that with state mandated initiatives and federal mandates. There are quite a few of them. Education has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, and there are incredible pressures on schools and administrators to meet those mandates. So our challenge going forward is to make sure that from the Secretary of Education on down and from the governor on down, there is a deep and substantive conversation happening between Montpelier and local schools so that people can, together with the state, going forward, figure out a plan for their community. And I know that Jeanette mentioned earlier regionally diverse educational systems, and I absolutely agree with that. But I actually think in Windham County, it's even more than regionally, because the educational system in Brattleboro looks different from the one in Putney because of choices people made at the local level. And I absolutely support that diversity and those initiatives. And I also think we need, as taxpayers, to be more involved in our schools and not just at budget time. But we have to be involved and say, this is the kind of education that we want, and this is what we're willing to pay to get that education.
Thanks, Becca. We have one more question tonight that I'd like to share. We are in the midst of probably the most advanced health insurance reform of any state. President Obama has initiated it with the Affordable Care Act. Vermont is engaged right now in acquiescing to the federal mandates, but we are also clear, and it's been a signature issue of the governor, that we're going to move forward towards a single payer. One of the issues around that, though, and one that I don't think we can get away from anymore, is how are we going to pay for it? So that's the issue that I'd like to put before you all here. There's lots of ways people pay for health insurance now. A lot of ways people don't even know they pay for health insurance right now. As we move forward, what are your suggestions for how we fund health care insurance reform? Roger?
Well, I think we all understand how complicated healthcare is today, and how complicated it is with cost. I've been privileged to having grown up in a small community that has a healthcare facility that was started by Dr. Otis, my doctor, who delivered me in Brattleboro before he built Grace Cottage Hospital, because he saw a need for primary care in the greater West River Valley community. But things have become much more complicated. There are many people who don't have access to health care, and that's why the Obama, or what's called Obamacare legislation, was passed. There was still is a lot of free care that we give. I was told today that there's a patient or an individual who came to the pharmacy and needs medication for hepatitis C. I bet you can't guess how much it cost a month for 28 pills, $28,000 for pills for a month of hepatitis C. So it's extraordinarily expensive today, and we know that in Windham County we've done a needs assessment, certainly, and the needs are primary care, critical health care, and mental health at all levels. Even in our school systems that are real critical need. In dental health, although we don't add that to the equation, that's a real need as well, although that's not addressed under the healthcare law that's coming in. One of the things I think that we all want to see is a healthcare system that provides access to all age groups and all people, because it's a critical need that we address it in a compassionate and an aggressive way. How it's going to be addressed, because it's cost shifting really that we're talking about, and I'm very pleased that Governor Shumlin has done in hiring Dr. Gruber from MIT, that was very instrumental in the Obama healthcare law, as a consultant to look at what we call the granular aspects. What is the impact going to be in terms of individuals, whether it's increased premiums or increased payroll taxes? What's the impact on businesses from these changes, and how much will it cost? There was a date to have the cost figures out before the election. Of course, that was missed. And the legislature is being very engaged before they even get back in session of hiring the RAND Corporation to do some similar analysis. So I think we all know the end game needs to be a change that provides access to individuals for health care, and it needs to be affordable. It needs to address primary care. I tell the people at Dartmouth and in other institutions, UVM Medical Center and the ACO, Accountable Care Organization, when they talk to me about healthcare, I say, now tell me, you're talking about healthcare and you're saying primary care, home health, and wellness is the primary things that need to be worked on in the future. Are you going to change the economic paradigm? Because most of the money flows up to specialists and up to places that are very costly. Are you going to change that? And the answer I get is, well, that's really not our role. Well, if we're really going to address healthcare reform and get it down to where it's needed to have preventable care, primary care, try to find a primary doctor today and have access. It's very difficult to do because it's hard. Doctors aren't going into primary care. We need to address those things of patient and individual needs that really need to address, because we know in our population in Vermont, we have 620,000 people. We're the second oldest state in the nation after Maine. Windham County is the oldest aging population probably in the United States. We need to attract young people. We need to have affordable jobs. We need to have good jobs. It's all related to economic development. And unless we address that with healthcare, we won't have a sustainable and a viable economy.
Thanks, Roger. Becca?
Sure. So we pay a lot for health insurance, and our health care costs are rising annually at somewhere between 6.5% or 8.5%. If you are someone in Vermont who makes approximately $47,000, you're already paying 10% of your income towards your health insurance. And if you're an employer, you're paying upwards of 13 to 18% of your payroll to go towards employee-sponsored health care. So there's a lot of money already being spent. Costs are rising. We're getting less in the amount of services that we're receiving. So something needs to change. We know it's not sustainable the way that we're going. And we have a moral imperative to be sure that each Vermonter is covered. Now, there's so many factors involved, and we've all talked about how complicated it is. But when you look at basically on the ground, what are the moving parts that we need to look at before we can figure out financing for this? We need to know, how are the providers going to be compensated? What is the benefits package going to look like? What will happen in Vermont if there's a patient that would like to take advantage of healthcare services outside of Vermont? And I could go on for quite a bit of time about all those details. Once we know the details, then we can start hashing out what the formula will look like for paying for it. It's certain to be some combination of a payroll tax and a health insurance tax. Now, an income tax. Now, I'm comfortable with this, although it's going to require a lot of heavy lifting in the legislature to get it passed. But I feel like it needs to happen, not just because the costs are unsustainable, but because at a human level, we're dealing with a situation where people have a great deal of fear around healthcare. So in my own life, some time ago, I was between jobs, and one health insurance plan ended, the next one had not started yet. And there was a gap in between, and I have pretty severe asthma, and I needed my medication. And I went to my pharmacy to get my medicine, and the pharmacist said, you know, you actually don't have coverage right now. And I said, but I need my medicine. And he said, I know you do. And you need your medicine now, and I don't need my payment now. And luckily, I live in Brattleboro, and Frank, down at Hotel Pharmacy, who was fabulous until he died, said to me, take the medicine, I know where you are, we will straighten this out when the healthcare insurance gets straightened out on your end. Now, I was lucky, I was fortunate, I was grateful, but not everybody has that kind of situation. They're just stuck. And that is not a situation that's healthy for families or for the economy or for Vermont. The other thing I want you to think about is that we have a situation where so many Vermonters that I talk to stay in their jobs because of health insurance. That is not a good formula for a healthy economy or a healthy family or a state, to have people who simply stay in a job for health insurance. We need to take health insurance out of the employment equation. I am committed to single payer. It will be, as I said earlier, heavy lifting, but I am committed to it, not just because it's morally the right thing to do, but I believe it will make a healthier and happier Windham County and state of Vermont.
Thanks, Becca. Jeanette?
Sure. First of all, I have a partial solution to Roger's concern about the demographics of Windham County. In order to shift it and get a younger population, I'll move to Windsor County. No.
They're not young either.
No, I know, but it'll help Windham County.
Okay.
So I firmly believe that everyone deserves access to health care. And the way to do that, they deserve it by just being a person who lives in Vermont, not connected to their employment, not because they can afford health insurance premiums, but just because they're here. So saying that, over the last 8 years, we have healthcare reform is not just starting, and it's not just Health Connect. Healthcare reform has been going on in Vermont for about 8 years. We passed the big bill a couple years ago, but we've been looking at how do we pay practitioners, how do we make it more affordable, how do we bend the curve, and we need to look at all of these things in order to figure out both how to finance it and how to deliver it. So we need to look at prevention, early intervention, supporting our practitioners, particularly primary care practitioners, taking on big pharma. We need to do something about the fact that it's going to cost $28,000 for 28 pills. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. So there are many, many things that we need to do. And when Becca was talking about that, we're paying employees, or employers and individuals are paying, we're also paying a lot in what we don't consider healthcare costs. In our income taxes, we're paying a lot for uninsured people to support the hospitals, to support the Medicaid program. So we are paying a lot for healthcare now. It's just how do we redistribute that? I also believe that it's probably going to be a combination of an income tax and a payroll tax, and maybe some dedicated source. I'm not sure what that dedicated source is right now, but I know that if there is one, it has to be a progressive base. It cannot be regressive. It has to be based on ability to pay. So we look at healthcare reform, and we kind of divide it up. We have above the head, or above the neck, and below the neck. And the above the neck, we a lot of times just ignore. Vision, dental, and mental health. Those have got to be part of the package that we're talking about, because if they're not, we're not really doing justice at all. The last year, the legislature, the Senate, not the entire legislature, but the Senate divided up, took the health care, what we're dealing with now, and divided it up and assigned certain aspects to different committees. And those committees started looking at different parts of it. The Finance Committee clearly was getting more involved in the financing. The Health and Welfare Committee was clearly getting more into the benefits package and what we would be, how we would be treating practitioners. Government Operations, which is the committee I chair, was looking at things that aren't quite as glitzy as that, and they're a little more mundane. But how's it going to be administered? If we have a single payer system, who's going to administer it? How are we going to write the contracts for that? How are we going to oversee it? How is it going to affect our retirement systems? Because the state is responsible for the state employees' retirement system and also responsible for the teachers' retirement system. So it's going to have a huge impact on that. So we started looking at all of those, and those committees will continue to look at that, so that when there are proposals that come from the administration, or when there aren't, we will be in a position to, I hope I'm there to say will be in a position to look at these and have done a lot of research before that. So paying for it is one thing, but we need to look at all of it and how we're going to pay for it, and how we're going to, and I hate this term, but it is true, how we're going to bend the curve of the increases. Because healthcare costs are going to continue to increase, but we need to make them increase at a slower rate. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
We're coming to the end of this hour together, and I appreciate everyone's participation here tonight. And I want to mention that Joan Bowman was invited, but because of a work conflict, she wasn't able to attend tonight. And but I do appreciate the time here. We'd like to give each of you time to close, to give a closing message, to give to the voters. We're heading into August. The primary is coming fast, so here's one of your chances to get a word out. A final word out from tonight, at least, to talk to the voters of Windham County. Jeanette, could you start it off?
Sure. So I was talking earlier about one of my strengths is the ability to take all the sides of an issue and look at them, and then hopefully come up with a solution that serves Vermonters in Windham County. But in the entire legislative session, it isn't just taking the sides of one issue and looking at them respectfully. It's taking all the issues and balancing them, because we've just talked tonight about 3 major issues that are all going to require a lot of attention, a lot of money, and a lot of change. So we need to look at how we balance those issues against each other. And it's true. If we had all the money in the world, we could solve all of these. But we have to figure out how we're going to fund home efficiencies, how we're going to fund changes in our transportation, education, healthcare. So it's not balancing just the aspect of one issue, but all the issues for themselves. So you may not always agree with my position on issues, and you may not always agree with the outcome what we come up with as a solution to the issue, but I hope that you would feel that you've been listened to and that you've been heard, and that I've tried my best to come up with a solution that serves Vermont, Vermonters, and Windham County. And I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette. Roger?
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be able to be a candidate for Windham County. It's an area that I grew up in. It's an area I've been passionate about. It's an area I served not only as Secretary of Agriculture and Food and Markets for the state, but also working on policy at the federal level with former Congressman Jim Jeffords on the House Ag Committee, where we passed the first Ag Land Protection Act in the country, and I wrote the first bill dealing with acid rain in the United States, and won an award from the Soil and Water Conservation Society of America for some of my work. But I'm passionate about Windham County. I've been involved in aggressively addressing energy issues as secretary on many fronts in terms of 25 by 25. I've been involved in food systems and bringing back the renaissance of food systems in Vermont with not only Farm to Plate, but also with Working Lands Enterprise Fund, and now is helping young people and others get started. And we have over 2,000 new farm businesses in the state and food systems in the state, even in Windham County, that are a key part of it. I've been involved in bringing businesses to Brattleboro in terms of larger firms like Commonwealth Dairy and smaller ones like the Big Picture Farm and others in terms of business competitions and helping in higher education, creating the Applied Institute for Ag and Food Systems at VTC, for which I was awarded an honorary doctorate for my work in Vermont. And I'm not talking about myself, but what I'm saying is that I have the ability to get things done because I work with people. I have a reputation with getting things done and a reputation of working across the aisle on all sides and not doing things because they're good politically, but what they're good for people of Vermont. And I'm passionate about Windham County. When I was secretary, I was known for being everywhere, every day of the week, talking to farmers and others, and I do the same in Windham County by knowing every community, knowing everyone that I can get to know in the communities, and aggressively fighting for our county. I was told many times when I was secretary up in Montpelier that southern Vermont was White River and Rutland. Well, southern Vermont is Windham County and Bennington County, and we aggressively will represent those areas to make them as well representative as they are in other parts of the state.
Thanks, Roger. Becca?
So one of the things I want to leave you with is that I've been an educator in Windham County for 17 years, both in the public schools and the Community College of Vermont, and through a variety of other grant programs through the Department of Education. And when you're a teacher, you see things at the ground level, and you understand poverty in a different way, and you understand your community in a different way. And as a teacher, and as a mom whose kids are now in the public schools, and as a writer who talks to people all over Windham County through my column in The Reformer, I feel like I have a good understanding of how difficult it is to raise a family here in Windham County. And the other thing I want to leave you with is my style of leadership, which is very similar to what Jeanette said, and that is about finding the overlap. I really try to find a connection with someone, even if at first gloss it doesn't appear that we have a lot in common. Now, when I first bought my house here in Brattleboro after being a renter for a very long time, when I first moved in and I unpacked my car, across the street from my house was an old Take Back Vermont sign in my neighbor's garage. And as someone who is a gay person living in Brattleboro, that was very difficult to see, and I felt like perhaps I was not welcome in my own community. But that, in fact, was just one aspect of my neighbor's political view. And over time, we needed each other. And that's what it means to be a Vermonter, is you find the overlap, you find the connection, and you help each other out. And that's how I will lead in Montpelier, which is I don't count anyone out, even if I disagree with them. I look forward to representing Windham County. I hope that you will send me to Montpelier to fight for working families here in Windham County, and I would love your support and your vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone here at BCTV
Yes.
once again,
Yes.
who continues to do an amazing job in bringing all of the area's news to the people of Windham County and beyond. I want to thank you, wish you all the best of luck in your ongoing work in this campaign. I want to remind the viewers and the voters that the polls are open. Early voting has started, and we hope you get out and vote. Democracy works only if we participate. And I think democracy works in Vermont as well as anywhere.
And you might add that by getting out and voting, all people have to do is go to their town clerk's office
right.
and vote. They
Or-
don't have to request, they can
Right.
request one,
Yeah.
but they can just go in and vote any day of the week.
And you can order your ballot online
Yeah.
through the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah. Well, thanks. We will be back. Montpelier Connection will be back later this summer, early fall, with starting our array of broadcasts leading up to the next session. And look forward to seeing you again. This is Mike Mrowicki. Thanks. Bye-bye.